Yeah, I think it's because users can Spotify can spot it. Spotify can. So post-pandemic, what kind of changes are you seeing in the ad landscape with current client accounts in paid advertising?
I think it really differs across kind of every client, but I think across the board, it's safe to say that it's just getting a lot more competitive.
Yeah.
On a weekly basis, we're seeing kind of new competitors appear, and I think advertisers are just getting a little bit more adventurous, and they're having the confidence to kind of put budget across ad spend and just kind of get out there a little bit more. I think because the marketplace has opened up. So I think for us, it's just the need to be agile and just be aware of how competitive it is getting. And I think the main thing is it's just getting more expensive. I think in those kind of glory days for businesses that could operate during COVID, we kind of had that peak of where there weren't many advertisers running. So you could therefore, you could capitalise on that. But now we're just having to be a little bit more clever with budget, I guess.
Yeah, and I think kind of coming out of lockdowns and more businesses opening up, we're seeing a lot of kind of new companies, new brands coming to the market as well, where potentially they haven't approached paid advertising before, and potentially due to the effects of lockdown, business might have suffered. It's now a new service they're looking at doing, and I think you're right. That's more people on the market, more people, flocking to these platforms means prices are being pushed up. So it really does put the pressure on kind of the paid advertising strategy and how kind of creatively we think about the execution of campaigns, but also choosing the platforms as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of you can have a tendency sometimes to play it quite safe, and you'll kind of think of channels that you think are fit for your business, but kind of just broadening that kind of perspective, I guess. I think there's so many paid platforms at the moment, but I don't think a lot of businesses are taking full advantage of that. I think it's really important to remember that you market to human beings. You don't market to businesses when you're doing B2B, for example. You need to still connect with people on that personal level. And I think broadening your perspective on where you should start running paid ads can massively help that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I know, for example, LinkedIn is kind of always thought of as the go-to for B2B marketing, and it's easy to fall into that trap of copy and visuals, all of the language being focused around the business, but actually kind of what you want to be focusing on more is, okay, what is this person's responsibility in the company? How can you improve the quality of their life, as an employee? How can you improve their output and what they're being held responsible for? And I think that's kind of a bit of a change in mindset we need to adopt. But also, like you said, I think also not just relying on, okay, if we're doing B2B advertising, don't focus just on LinkedIn. Can we branch out into other platforms, platforms like Twitter, where there are a lot of kind of really engaged communities and sub-communities around different niches. And kind of non-traditional platforms as well. So kind of outside of the big 3 or 4, can you be looking at things like Pinterest? And I know that's something that, we're looking more at as well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think even things like Spotify, if you think how many people have been stuck working at home in the last 18 months, most people will have Spotify on in the background. Just kind of making sure that you're there within their working day, I guess, can have a real impact in kind of them thinking maybe later down the line, oh, I remember hearing that ad online. I think quite often businesses will think, okay, we need to get paid search up and running and a paid social campaign. But actually, how do you think more about where your kind of target audience is in their day-to-day life, rather than kind of just thinking, okay, I need to target this business, I need to get on LinkedIn. I think it's not the right approach.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because actually, I know in our case, we always have Spotify on in the background in the agency. Everyone's listening to it. And that's a prime example of capturing an engaged audience where people might not potentially think of, targeting companies or B2B in that example. So
I think as well it applies to B2C. So for example, like home interiors, people think, if you sell a product for a home interior, you think, okay, it's all e-commerce focused. And it is, but just broadening, well, where do users go when they're looking for home inspiration? Me personally, it's straight to Pinterest. I want that initial inspiration. If you can be there right at that's the beginning of that cycle.
Yeah.
I think, just having more of an understanding of where your users go rather than just thinking kind of where can I get all these conversions, kind of really thinking about what that customer journey looks like.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point, because I think it's also taking a look at how we integrate the paid strategy with the wider marketing strategy and how we can pull in, for example, the content strategy, so that when we're advertising, we're not just looking at pure cold hard lead gen, but we're, like you said, we're looking at the entire customer life cycle.
Yeah.
And if you can kind of start to utilize different types of media to get buy into your brand early on, then we've seen with various different clients the positive impacts of bringing in informational types of content ahead of paid advertising campaigns. You can really see the fruitful results from that.
I think as well, kind of if your product has a longer buying cycle, if it's not an impulse buy, for example, anyone purchasing a holiday, you kind of go through that real research stage, you consider your options. I think in terms of kind of the content and, having gated guides or kind of just extra information for the user, they may not be in that mindset to book there and then, but they're looking for additional information. They can see you as the expert in that field. And again, just gives them another nudge and kind of helps to guide them on that journey, really.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it kind of brings it back to, as there's more competition in the market, you also have to kind of acknowledge that people on social media, general web users in general, they're more savvy than ever. People can kind of see through, traditional marketing tactics quite easily, and I think it takes a lot more than just having a good service or a good product. I think you really need to kind of bring compelling content to the forefront of paid advertising, and I think a part of that is focusing on how you can why people are on social media in the first place, right? Like they're looking to either be educated, informed, or entertained, right? And again, bringing it into the content strategy, how can we engage people ahead of them, entering the buying cycle or the purchasing cycle? And part of that, I think, is diversifying the types of media we're promoting. So we're looking at building in a lot more video advertising, video and motion audio as well. You mentioned about Spotify. I think looking at how you can kind of create organic content that people will engage with and kind of boost that to the right demographics using potential new platforms that you haven't looked at before. Yeah,
and I think as well with kind of the emergence of TikTok, even video advertising, I think, has shifted. People are looking for kind of that raw kind of footage rather than something really slick and professional. They'd rather have something that feels a little bit more authentic and kind of something that they can connect with. So I think that will be a real shift for us in the next few years, is how you can connect with users on that kind of more personal level rather than it being kind of a really slick presentation of your brand. I think that's going to be a real shift for advertisers in the next years. Yeah, I think it's because users can spot it right away. Whereas, if you see a lot of user-generated content, especially video, like you said, it has this kind of like raw, this kind of not too polished feel. And then when you're scrolling on any social platform and then you come across like a really clean, nicely cut video, you kind of automatically recognize it as, this is a promotion or a brand. It looks so jarring, doesn't it, in comparison to the rest of the feed?
I think that's it. Yeah, it stands out in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of brands lose people, because you're kind of almost not communicating on the user's terms. You're communicating on your own terms, and I think that's a hard balance to strike.
Yeah.
But it's something that I think is going to become more and more important over the next couple of months, next year, in how we kind of communicate online and the types of media we produce.
Yeah, and I think as well, just coming back to that kind of customer journey, I think with a lot of the cookie changes and iOS 14, I think the key for advertisers in the next few years is the need for that primary data. You need kind of these big email lists that are kind of all segmented, and you've got real customer journeys going through them in order to use that data for additional advertising. I think we've seen it across a lot of our kind of clients where we've had to kind of find workarounds to that iOS update. I think it'll be the mixture of having that primary data and having creative that really speaks to them that's going to be the key. I think you can have all the budget in the world, but if you don't really consider that, then I think you'll massively lose out in the next few years.
Yeah, I think what kind of ties it all together and what it comes down to is whether you've got kind of a short-term strategy focused just on leads right now versus investing long-term in kind of winning the hearts and minds of users online by building a solid content and video strategy into your paid advertising so that you start to reap the benefits down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what a lot of the younger generation, they've grown up with kind of all this online advertising. They can see through the cracks. So they want to engage with communities on their level. They want to engage with brands that really speak to them. So I think, as you said, having that kind of, just a price promotion is not going to cut it with them. So yeah, it's just kind of thinking and linking it back to a business's core values, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
And just making sure that the advertising, really syncs up with that. There's no point a business having all these great values if then their advertising doesn't necessarily stick to that.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of, if those are your values, you kind of need to commit on social, and you need to prove it to people, and it needs to be show, don't tell, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If you had one channel that you can see massive growth potential in the next 3 years, what one would you hedge your bets on?
I think, it's a huge channel already, and it's not going to be the one that you probably think, but I think YouTube. I think how brands utilize YouTube and can look to start building up communities around YouTube is going to become really powerful, and I think we're already seeing it a lot. And that will only kind of give us more opportunities to leverage paid advertising and kind of the Google advertising platform as a whole to tap into those engaged communities. But like I said, I think it takes a lot of work to build that up ahead of time.
Yeah. I think the same is said for TikTok.
Yeah.
I think people come to us and like, oh, I want to start up a TikTok campaign. You're like, hang on a minute. Yeah. TikTok's not one of these platforms that you can just put a load of budget behind and you're off. I think it really needs that commitment to build that organic following and all that organic content first to then build an advertising strategy. But saying that, I think that, TikTok has grown massively in the last 18 months, but I still think it's going to grow at quite a rate in the next few years. And I also think that there'll be an element of B2B that comes in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
I think where they've kind of launched this kind of CV type recruitment approach, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that, especially when targeting younger, kind of the next generation of CEOs.
Absolutely, yeah. I think TikTok is only going to grow in both user base popularity and also how brands kind of look to use it. And I think as a lot of companies are struggling to recruit now, that could be a really great platform to explore how to engage, introducing new people to brand and kind of become ambassadors for your brand and also employ kind of like a new generation as well. Yeah, so definitely. Yeah, really exciting platform.
Yes. What are your 3 key takeaways from our chat today?
My 3 key takeaways would be, so bringing your content strategy to kind of the forefront of paid advertising, looking into new platforms outside of the traditional ones, so outside of Facebook and Google and LinkedIn. Look at where your target demographic and your personas, what spaces they kind of inhabit online, where there are kind of small communities, Twitter, Reddit, places like that you can kind of look to advertise to. And then lastly, just diversifying your content for paid advertising as well.
Yeah.
Don't just rely on just imagery, just copy. Look into video, look into audio production as well. And kind of produce what you're seeing other people engage with versus what you feel like best represents your brand.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's one final thing for me, and that's don't be afraid to diversify your channel mix. You know, if you try something and it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world, but just you never know until you try it. So I think that's kind of the key takeaway for me, is just give it a go and see what happens.
Be brave.
Yeah.